Well, you need to do due diligence every time you're purchasing property. You need to double the effort every time you're purchasing something off plan. Why?
And this you can tell from the very beginning, where you see a red flag, right? Like an extremely red. So what are these things that if we see them in developers or we see them in sale agreements, we should not even think about working with that developer?
There are many I can think about.
Yes.
And every time a client has come to me having lost their money or being on the verge of losing their money in a scam project, I'll spot one of them in that transaction.
Yeah.
Number one, and the most obvious one, there was a dispute with the family. The transfer could not be done. There was a case in court. They had run out of money. They never completed the houses. People had paid in full. Yeah. Like I'm talking about a practical one that I have seen.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what ended up happening is that some of the purchasers that realized that this is going really wrong and I might as well take what is left of this project, they went and tried.
A few months ago, I disclosed that I am in the process of buying my second apartment in Nairobi. And just like I did with my first apartment, I am buying this apartment through the off-plan method. And why am I using the off-plan method? Is because that is the most accessible way for most of us to buy apartments, because it has a flexible payment plan. And so that means you can decide to pay for that apartment for 2 years, 5 years. And it's the most affordable way, really, because if you go to buy a complete apartment and you're being told this apartment is 8 million, most of us do not have the 8 million sitting in our savings or bank accounts for us to, just withdraw the money and buy the apartment. So again, I found it fit for me to buy the second apartment through the off-plan method. And because I'm buying the second apartment from a different developer, I've realized that different developers have different clauses in their sale agreements. And so that means that there's no way I could say that because I have experience of buying my first apartment, I still can't say that I do not need help or that I have 100% experience when it comes to buying real estate in Kenya. And so I thought it fit to bring back our resident conveyancing lawyer, Kanyiri, to help me navigate this process. And at the same time, when I shared that I am in the process of buying a second apartment, I got so many, like over 100 inquiries from the tribe who are curious about how I'm doing it, who also requested that I document the full process of buying that second apartment. And they did forward me a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries. And as I'm learning, you guys are learning. And so I brought Wamuyu back to teach us more things about the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to buying real estate, and also to answer some of my questions and some of your questions. So Wamuyu, karibu tena.
Thank you so much, Agatha. As you've said, my name is Wamuyu Kanyiri. I am a conveyancing advocate practicing here in Nairobi, Kenya.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here once again because all the conversations that we've had so far about investments in real estate, there's a lot of wealth tribers that have already benefited from this information and that have started doing things the right way, and less people are losing their money in scam projects.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to be here to, continue with this conversation. And congratulations on your new investments.
I always say use professionals, because for most of us, buying an apartment is not easy. I remember in the last video, Boyo mentioned that, for like a good 1-bedroom apartment in this Nairobi, you can't get it for less than 5.5 million. 5.5 million is a lot of money for a lot of us. So why would you want to risk losing all that money and starting from scratch? I've always said that one of the worst financial mistakes you want to avoid as much as you can is starting from scratch. It's painful, very painful, and especially you know how to start from scratch in your 30s or your 40s, even in your 20s. If you build something, you want to keep the momentum of compounding happening for you. And so it's always very important to have you on set. And in today's video, we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And one of the ugliest things that can happen to someone when they're buying an apartment off plan is the fear of will the developer deliver? And if they do not deliver, will they deliver on time? So because I have that fear at the moment, and I'm sure many other workshoppers have experienced or are experiencing that fear, how would you mitigate, or would you advise us? How would you advise us to mitigate that fear of failure to deliver and them not delivering on time, because we've seen it a lot?
All right. Thank you for that question. And it's a very legitimate fear because I think the numbers of people who've lost their money in projects where they invested in, and then the developments were never completed at all, or they ended up being completed like 3 years later, 5 years later, which I have personally experienced with some clients that have come to me at various stages of their, investment journey or in their apartment purchase journeys. So that happens a lot with off-plan, and it's such a legitimate fear. But as you've said, now that we are discussing the good, the bad, and the ugly of off-plan, the failure to deliver is one of the ugly side of plan purchases. But then when you approach these transactions the right way, you have very many ways to protect yourself. You have very many ways of safeguarding your interest and not ending up in such position. Number one, and I've talked about this before, I'll keep talking about it again, and I'll never stop talking about it. Due diligence. Well, you need to do due diligence every time you're purchasing property. You need to double the effort every time you're purchasing something off plan. Why? Off plan means more risk. More risk requires more investment in terms of due diligence. So it's when you're buying off plan, you cannot afford to just rely on a word of mouth. You cannot afford to rely on the word of an influencer. You cannot afford to rely on vibes on inshallah. I'm sorry, but you can't. You cannot. You cannot. You just have to do your due diligence. And we've spoken about this before. And due diligence has these different aspects. Number one, if I'm coming and to you as a developer and telling you that I'm selling you an apartment off plan at 8 million, and I need you to commit say 2 million as your down payment, you don't just give me 2 million. There are things you need to find out about me as the developer and about what I'm doing with my projects before you give me the 2 million. So there's some non-negotiable aspects of due diligence that you just don't compromise on. You can do them by yourself. You can do them through your lawyer, whichever way, but you have to do them. Number one, who is this developer? Yes. Right? Find out, is it a local developer? Is it a Chinese developer? Is the company registered? Have they done any projects in the country before? What do those projects look like? Do they own this property in terms like the land on which they are constructing these apartments? Do they actually own this land? Have they gotten the necessary approvals from the government? Do they are they financing themselves? Are they financing the project themselves, or are they relying on a bank loan to finance the project? You have to ask all these questions. That is what due diligence is about, and it's not a simple process. As I keep telling people, buying land is not like buying a loaf of bread. Let's not simplify. I mean, if I had $1 for every time someone told me, nyinyi wakili, your job is complicating transactions. You guys complicate things. Yeah, there's so many clients because no, they come here and they want to, you just tell me where to sign, I pay this money, and then everything goes well. And I'm like, hold up. Let's take this step by step. And they feel like they are complicating things because, you have to do all these processes. Some of them come with some cost. And, it's just something, it's not just something you can afford to overlook. So, don't simplify a process that's not simple. Buying property is not simple. Buying property off plan, it's even harder. So you have to do all these aspects of due diligence. Once you've done the due diligence, the second aspect that you have to be really careful about for you to protect yourself from those risks of off plan is the contract. Okay. And when I talk about contract in the context of purchase of apartments, I'm talking about the sale agreement. There are many people who get given the offer letter and they feel like that's a contract. That is not a contract. It's sort of an intention to enter into a contract. The actual contract in this case is the sale agreement. And a good sale agreement is the cornerstone of any successful transaction, right?
Yeah.
A good sale agreement is the cornerstone of any proper real estate transaction. Yeah. And why do I say that? It's the sale agreement that covers all the uncertainties of what could happen. And we say in law school, when we are taught about making contracts, you're told before you sit down to draft a contract, can you first think through and try to imagine all the things that could go wrong? Okay?
Yeah.
Try to imagine every possible thing that could go wrong. Once you've listed all of them down, figure out if these, so number one, this is what could go wrong. What do I do about it to protect myself in the event that were to happen? So that's the mindset that any good lawyer drafting a contract, and of course, it depends on which side you are acting for. A developer will be looking at different aspects. A developer's lawyer in that case will be looking at different aspects. A purchaser's lawyer will be looking at different aspects. In this case, if I'm drafting a sale agreement for a developer, the first thing I'll need to think about is what are the circumstances through which my client as a developer could suffer, right?
Yeah.
So then I'll cover all those scenarios for my clients, right? So that is and now when someone comes to purchase an apartment, that's what I will offer. So then it's upon them to ensure that they have a lawyer on their side who now evaluates this contract from the POV of the purchaser. Because when the contract was initially drafted, it was drafted from the POV of what risks does my client stand to face, and you alleviate them. Now, you need now the purchaser's lawyer to also look at this contract and see from this contract what risks is the purchaser or is my client exposed to, and now alleviate those risks. And so a proper contract arises when now there's been the negotiation between both the developer's lawyers and the purchaser's lawyer, and they arrive at a document that is mutually fair for both parties, balances the interests of both parties, balances the risks that either party is taking up.
So, like, other parties, I should view sale agreement as a risk management tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the first level of managing your risk is the due diligence. But even more importantly, after managing your risk through the due diligence, come later and secure that those other risks with the contract, right? So now when you talk about now that fear of the developer not, and you see now the mistake that many people make, and they decide, you know what, I don't think I need representation in this transaction because everything seems so straightforward, and especially when the marketing is done, it's made to look like A, B, C, D. Come, sign, pay, we construct, we hand over, you give us our money, and everybody goes happy. And that's what is ideal. But we have to agree that many times things don't go the ideal way. And so you have to always protect yourself for when things don't go that ideal way.
Yeah.
So the practice of people signing contracts that they haven't read, and even if they have read, because they don't have the capacity to understand the legalese and the legal language in these contracts, and they might think that they understand, but they don't know how some of these clauses play out in real life. So I would say including a professional when doing an off-plan purchase of apartment is extremely essential for the reasons that we have discussed. Now, how would you now protect or ensure that the development that you have committed to is delivered on time? Number one, we've talked about this before, completion date. Completion date is one of the clauses that is very, very important in a contract for purchase of land. And the completion date is the date that now stipulates. So when it comes to off-plan purchase of apartments, we have two completion dates. So one is the completion date that refers to completion of construction. Many people will refer to it as the practical completion date. So that one will state out the date when the construction will be complete. Now, the trick that many developers, lawyers use is defining that date in a manner that it's left to be indefinite, right? An example is a clause saying the completion date for this transaction shall be 31st December 2027 or 15 days after the architect has given the certificate of completion. So on one hand, they're giving you this 31st December 2027 as the completion date, but on the other hand, they're saying, or 15 days later after the architect that we are using has given the certificate of completion, whichever is later. So even if we get to that 31st December 2027 and the architect certificate of completion has not been issued, completion date has not materialized. And that is the clause that how do I describe it? That is a clause that eats many people. Or rather, that's where now the rubber hits the road, when you realize that I committed to this project, I paid them money, the date when the construction was to complete is here, but they haven't completed. They come to a lawyer and they tell them, wakili, mimi nilisign here. Let me speak in English because we have a lot of audience that don't understand Swahili. But anyway, they come to you and they tell you, wakili, I signed this contract, I paid this money, completion date is here, help me, what do I do?
Yeah.
And you go to read the completion date and you find out that the completion date states what I have said, So when you even try to engage the developer, the developer tells you, but we said it's this date or 15 days after the architect certificate, right? And I've seen that clause also being interpreted in court, and it leaves the court in a very also awkward position because that's what the contract says, But you see now in your case, you saw 31st December 2027 and you are happy, but you didn't read the rest of that clause to see what else is this clause saying. So those are some of the clauses that you pay attention to when you are doing an off-plan contract. The other thing is something called force majeure clause. Many of you may have heard about force majeure clause. So a force majeure clause is a clause that is included in many contracts, and it's supposed to stipulate what will happen if certain circumstances happen.
Okay.
Now, ideally, force majeure clause should cover events or factors which we call acts of God. Acts of God will include things like unpredicted flood, earthquake, fires, those factors that one cannot be predicted, and many times there's nothing much we can do to mitigate them.
Yeah, because for the developer cannot do anything.
Yeah.
COVID, when COVID happened.
Exactly. Something like COVID. It's not something that anybody could have predicted. It's not something that anybody could have, put some mitigation factors to ensure that it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But now it has happened and it has affected things. So ideally, that is what a force majeure clause covers, that if this happens, what is going to happen? But increasingly, I've seen a habit by lawyers of extrapolating the events that count as force majeure event to include things like getting approvals from the government. I mean, when you were doing construction, you knew that you would need a certificate of occupation.
You did, yeah.
Right? So you knew that there need things you need to comply with so that at the end, when you apply for the certificate of occupation, it's issued. So for me, some of these things are not really acts of God. The fact that the county government has denied you a certificate of occupation because there's one or two things that you haven't complied with, to me, they're not acts of God, and they should not they should not constitute force majeure events.
Yeah.
But a good majority of the contracts that I have reviewed in the recent past have things like those as force majeure. In fact, even a more ridiculous one is obligations of third parties. So for instance, I've seen agreements talk about if the developer has contracted someone to do something within the project, and then that person has not delivered the obligation, they make that a force majeure event, right? So I like, there's a lot of gray area right now with that clause, but then again, this clause is usually drafted to say that if any of these circumstances happen, the purchaser shall not be entitled to any compensation. They shall not be, basically just to say that if these circumstances happen, that the purchaser will not be entitled to any compensation or refund.
Yeah.
So it's one of the clauses that you really need to pay attention to as the purchaser. Ensure that, one, the factors that have listed as force majeure events, that they are actual acts of God and not acts of persons. And number two, if they happen, there needs to be an avenue for you to get your money back. Because, for instance, think of a scenario like that one we are talking about, that the county has not given a certificate of occupation. It's something that the developer can do something about it. They can comply with whatever obligations they need to comply with for the county to give the certificate. If it's the obligation of a third party, if the developer has engaged, say, the services of somebody to supply, say, kitchen cabinets, and they haven't supplied, the developer has an option of pursuing this person to deliver the obligation or to get a refund so that they also refund the purchasers. But they can't, it would be wrong to make the purchasers bear the loss for something that they have nothing to do with.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so force majeure clauses need to be negotiated in such a way that if some of those factors happen, there's leeway for compensation, or rather refund of the purchase price paid. So those are some of the mitigation factors around now that risk of failure to deliver and delivery in time, including also breach or default clauses. Like, what does your contract say when it comes to the developer not completing the construction on time? I've seen agreements that come without that clause at all. Yeah?
Yes.
So you have to engage the services of your own lawyer to negotiate for the inclusion of that clause that says if the developer doesn't do this, you can either, offer an extension of time, maybe a 6-month grace period. And if within 6 months the developer still doesn't figure out whatever it is that they need to figure out for them to complete, you have the option of terminating the contract and getting back your money. So those are some of the things that you really need to pay attention to when protecting your interest from that particular fear. Yeah. Also, recently we've had an issue with zoning regulations. So zoning regulations are the regulations that state, from the county government, that state what can be constructed where. You realize that if you go to Karen today, you'll not find a high rise. Why?
Yeah.
Because the area has been earmarked as an area that doesn't accommodate those kind of developments or those kind of buildings. If you go to CBD, you'll find apartments that go all the way to, what is the highest building in town? Which is, I don't know. But when you think about buildings like 88,
Yeah.
and I think, there's a new building in town, I think near Times Towers. Is it Pension Towers? Yeah, it has really, really many floors. So basically, that is what zoning includes.
That the Laudi Tower.
Yeah,
Laudi
Karen, yes.
Yeah.
That is what zoning has been about. Recently, there's been a lot of push and pull about the zoning for Kileleshwa, Kilimani, Lavington, right? So there has been a lot of questions of these areas were traditionally marked as zone 4. Zone 4 meant you could only construct a building up to the 4th floor. But because that's a really old law, and with time there has been all this population increase, and these are the areas that are closest to the Nairobi Central District. So it got to a point where the government realized that it was not sustainable. That zone 4 for those areas was no longer sustainable.
Yeah.
So the government decided to open up the areas to higher buildings. But then again, they didn't finalize the paperwork or the legislation aspect of it. So what the county has been doing is operating on the basis of discretion. So as a developer, you do your building plans, you come to the county, you apply for an approval based on, what you're proposing to construct, how you're proposing to take care of the infrastructure needs, and the county on discretion basis gives you an approval. Now, the challenge now came with the resident associations in these areas, because they feel like there's no way I wake up and there's a construction on this side, there's a construction on this side, there's a construction on that side. I mean, how are we going to survive with these minimal resources? Because when these areas were being developed, the infrastructure that was put in place was for a certain population. And now this population is growing, and we can see the infrastructure growing in a way to accommodate this population. So in a number of cases, there's been cases in court where the resident association are suing certain developers, trying to stall their developments. And one of the major, issues raised in court is one, that these developers did not do public or adequate public participation before they went ahead to do their project. And there's been a couple of developments that, have pending cases in court. So that is also something that a purchaser investing in these areas need to be aware of, so that also, even when they're negotiating the contract, because they wouldn't know whether those will become an issue or not,
Yes.
they can now negotiate for clauses or the terms that protect them in the event that that happens, in the event that the developer is sued and the development is stalled, to ensure that at a certain point, the purchaser is not stuck in a case that might lag in court for another 5 years, and their money, they're losing value for their money. So ensuring that they have an exit clause if such a thing were to happen is extremely important.
I think that's extremely important because, like, a majority of people, even who consult me about wanting to buy apartments, most people want to buy them in Kilimani, Kileleshwa, Lavington,
Yeah.
people want upmarket apartments. And so, of course, that costs money because of the zone they're in.
Yeah.
Imagine having your 10 million or 15 million stack. That can really, it would mess up with your portfolio. That is
Absolutely.
important. So yeah, building is the thing, and you should make sure that your sale agreement tells you what will happen or compensates you for if there's a delay for such a situation. So the other big fear that I experienced when it comes to buying off-land apartments is the failure of the developer to meet expectations. And for me, I saw it firsthand when I was buying my first apartment, where I shared on this platform that when I was buying that apartment, I was not living in Kenya, I was living in Dubai. And so I came back to Kenya, or I came back to Nairobi when the development had completed, and obviously you're very excited. I want to go and see my first big purchase. And so I was given the key, went and opened the door, and I'm like, wow. I didn't like what I saw. So the things that I hated, 3 things were like, oh my God. The first one is the toilet faces the kitchen. It's like, this is the washroom door, and obviously it's what Nairobians call toilet. So
Yeah.
that's another. In fact, that's the fourth one. Anyway, so the washroom and the toilet and the bathroom are combined, and then also to the washroom faces directly, like they face each other like this, the kitchen. I'm just like, is this even sanitary? And I thought of it like, imagine you have a guest, right?
Yeah.
Prank guests call them. And then they start, eat that picture.
Oh, yeah.
You understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I just thought
yeah.
it's ridiculous. So that's the first thing. The second thing I thought is ridiculous is the lighting. So based on the photos that the marketing, photos, and I remember last time we talked about this, and nowadays there's AI. Somebody can generate AI images of
Yeah.
how building is going to look like, and you get very excited. So based on the photos that were sold to us, I thought my house would be like well lit, like the space we are sitting in right now. Because the other good thing about lighting is that even if a house is tiny,
Yeah.
lighting makes it look
Cozy.
cozy and open and
Yeah.
spacious. So that's the other thing. I walked into this room, I was like, hey, Jamani,
I'm so sorry.
I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And the other frustrating thing is like if I call them my neighbor, like the house adjacent to mine, the lighting was perfect. So the problem was the location of selection of unit. Yeah, and you talked about that in the last. There is that due diligence process. Like, I think you're buying from the diaspora. Like, make sure that the unit you're purchasing, the location of it is well lit or meets the standards that you want. So that's the other thing. The other thing is the size. Because developers use all these ridiculous names for these apartments. What junior 1 bedroom, like studio. There's like
Standard
standard 1 bedroom executive. For marketing purposes. But then for you, what does that even mean? So now that was my other problem, where I walked into this room and I was like, I would never. I remember thinking, like I would only live in that house where, life has taught me, has shown Ishege, where like my finances are dwindling and I'm in a terrible, that's the only way I would live there. Because I felt like that house doesn't support dignified living. And I was like, I pity the person who's going to live here. And actually, I was like, I hope the person who's going to live here is like a student who doesn't have a lot of needs, right? Like it could never accommodate a family. That's what I'm saying. And it could not even accommodate me. So you see, in that way, that being the most important purchase or the biggest investment I ever made at that age, I felt betrayed by even myself. I would have done better in terms of due diligence. I felt I betrayed myself. I felt the lawyer I used betrayed me. I used that divorce lawyer. I will always say on this platform, I guess to find out later that you lawyers, you have different, roles. This like there's divorce lawyers, there's conveyancing lawyers, there's even like lawyers who do litigation and those that don't. I paid school fees for those lessons. So yeah, so basically what I'm saying is that my expectations were not met and also the developer did not meet my expectation. So, Wamuyu, in a nutshell, what should we do?
What should you have done?
What should I have?
Anyway, I really sympathize with your situation. And you see, again, the reason why this conversation is important is that once you make some of these purchases, they're long term. It's not like the way I can buy a pair of shoe and then the next day I'm like, I don't like this pair of shoe. I can easily get rid of it and buy another one. But the same doesn't apply to property. So that's why you need to invest as much time as you need to. You need to invest in as many professionals as you need to. And, do everything that you need to do to ensure that you're not stuck with an asset for years that you hate.
Yes.
And you also bring in another good point, specialization of lawyers. This might be a controversial topic, but for me, if I sit down with a lawyer and the lawyer tells me, oh, I was in the divorce court in the morning, then at 4, I had I had a case in the rent tribunal, then at 1, I had a mediation in my office, then at 3, there's a client I was defending in the criminal court, then, I don't know, at 4, I needed to meet a client to discuss their, I don't know, is it real estate property issue? I'm like, that's a lawyer I'll not hire for me, because all these are so different and diverse areas of law that you cannot possibly master. Yeah. So you'll have bits and pieces of information or knowledge about one thing and bits and pieces of information about the other thing. Why should I entrust you with an asset that I'm buying for 8 million if all you have is bits and pieces of information about this particular transaction?
Yeah.
So for me, they say I advocate, or rather when it comes to consumers of legal services, I really advise, if you're doing a property purchase, just go with a conveyancing lawyer, or rather a lawyer who's at least 70% of what they handle is conveyancing. Because what happens is that because they do this so much and so often, they are exposed to way more scenarios or way more circumstances that opens their mind more, and they're able to represent you more effectively. Again, if you have a divorce file, please don't bring it to me. The judge will force you to stay married because I don't know how to draw a divorce petition. So it may be controversial, but from the standpoint of a consumer of legal services, always go for a lawyer that has specialization for whatever it is that you are seeking for.
Yeah.
Now, coming to the second point about the specifications or your expectations not being met, it's because there's a stage you skipped. And what is this stage? Analysis of the building plans, analysis of the layout, right?
Yeah.
Because, and this is what do I say? I know advertisement materials are meant to communicate something or to make an impression about something, but the same way that you can go to the supermarket, I don't know if this is the best analogy. You know, the way you go to the supermarket and buy a product like, say, Royco Siko buyer, but say buy a product like Royco. sometimes they'll have an image of something that has been made with Roycol.
Yes, the meal.
Yes, the meal that has been used there for impression purposes or for advertisement purposes.
Yeah.
I'm actually, because sometimes I'm very keen on reading sachets and seeing what disclaimers are given. I've actually seen a disclaimer on a product they've written that the picture used there in that packaging material is only for advertisement purposes. And it doesn't mean that if you use the product, your meal will turn out the same.
Yeah.
Now, because yes, you can buy Roycol and your food still looks,
Yeah.
it doesn't look good because it's not just Royco that will make your food there's the skill, there's the other ingredients you use, there's everything else. So just because you've bought a Royco that has an image for food that looks really good doesn't always mean that if you go and use the product, your food will turn out the same way. Now think about that when you're thinking about advertisement materials for real estate. When you're looking at renders, when you're looking at those models, when you're looking at the brochures, look at the brochures with a pinch of salt. Just the same way you looked at that image on the Royco packaging and you knew that my food will not automatically look like this just because I've used this product. There are other things that I need to put into consideration. And again, people have different skills. One person will use the same exact ingredients and they're fine. Their food turns out nice, and another one will use the same exact ingredients and their food doesn't turn out. I don't know if this is still the same analogy, but basically, what I'm trying to say is
like let's say you can have like developer A who uses the same finishing materials. He's a developer V finishing materials, and you'll find that the finishing for this one, the way we say like the way those tiles were placed, the alignment for light fixtures, you find like
yeah.
makes sense.
There's a lot of room for the workmanship,
Yeah.
but also you'll be surprised that I've read sale agreements which have a clause specifically saying that you're entering into that contract on the basis of the building plans and the drawings and not on the basis of the advertisement materials. Right?
Yeah.
Which is true. Which is true.
It's true, but the party.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why, on top of being impressed by what has been, photographed or what has been designed on the brochures and the posters, study the building plans.
Yeah.
Study the building plans. And this is a word. It's a complex aspect of this because many people don't have the expertise.
Yeah.
Unless it's someone within the construction industry. If I give you the drawings, you'll probably not be able to put 1 + 1 together to know what exactly does this mean in terms of the layout. Like what is the square meters from this space to this space, or from this facility to this other one. So when it comes to that, there are 3 ways you can go about it. Number 1, show houses. There are developers that are very keen on building a show house. So they do a show house first, and then they use that show house as, do we say, the advertisement? Such that when you want, yes, as the standard of, this is what we are constructing. So maybe if they're doing a 1-bedroom unit, maybe for 65 square meters, they show you that house, and it's supposed to act as a model for what they'll do with the rest of the apartments. So when you walk into that house, you can easily see, oh, this is how the bathroom is designed. This is how the toilet is designed. This is what the kitchen looks like. This is the space between the counters. This is a space that can fit my fridge. This is a space that can fit my cooker. This is a space, maybe if you want to buy a dishwasher, this is a place I can install a dishwasher. So a show house gives you more practical expectations than any poster or brochure ever will. So for the people who don't want to take their chances, always go for developments that have a show house. And then it's also important that you stipulate in your contract that your apartment shall look substantially similar as the show house. So that protects you in very many ways, because if at the end they construct something, shady, and you have a dispute in court, it's very easy to show the court, this is what the show house looks like, this is what they have given me. There's nothing similar here, right? So it's way easier for when you want to know what to expect to commit to projects that have a show house. Number 2, previous projects. So if a developer has done projects A, B, C, and now they're doing project D, if you go to their project A, see what they constructed. You go to their project B, see what they constructed. Go to development C, see what they've constructed. It already gives you also a more practical idea of what to expect with development D. Because you see how their reasoning is. You see how their workman, like the people that they employ to do the construction, you see the level of skill, you see the accurate levels,
Like, for example, like there are people, there are show houses or even apartments you walk into, and like they, like, some, like, people who have, for example, OCD, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
no alignment of a closet, and you're just like, how could the developer miss this? Like, how?
I know.
So
Yeah.
if you see like their development A, B, C, and you're like, yeah, they always get their closets, right? They always buy tap that
Yes.
last. They always buy the proper lighting fixtures. It's like, I know, it's
Yeah.
very important for people to do that.
Yeah, so there are those 3 aspects. So number 1, if you're in the construction, you review the drawing materials, or if you're not within the industry, engage a professional. You can engage an architect, you can engage a structural engineer. Let them break it down for you. Let them also pick things in their professional capacity that you'd otherwise never have picked if you're looking at those materials as a layman. So there's that option of studying the building plans. There's the option of the show house.
Yeah.
There's the option of previous developments. Yeah. Oh, number four. There's always the option of requesting them to provide you with the schedule of finishes and the materials that they intend to use. So they already have a schedule where they've decided these are the kind of in terms of, if these are the kind of doors that we intend to construct, that we intend to use for the apartment. These are the kind of, say, for the inbuilt appliances. These are the brands that we intend to use. For the ceramics, this is the quality that we intend to use. So again, for someone within the industry or who has some bit of knowledge about these materials, they can outrightly tell from the schedule that has been presented to them that I don't want this material or don't want this brand in my house. So then you can decide that you will walk away from that project, or you can negotiate for modifications of whatever it is that you don't like from their initial schedule.
Yeah, and I believe that that is a very important step, because I've experienced a client, or like it's actually a colleague. We worked in the same office, and they decided to take up a mortgage, a 14 million mortgage in Kilimani. And the house was like, the show house was beautiful. As you see, this is a 14 million project at least 2 apartment. Like, we're there congratulating him when finally the house was handed over. So first of all, he didn't face any delay, so that it was handed over on time. But remember, it's a mortgage, right? Even if it's 14 million, you're going to pay that. Even, like, this is a financial engagement or responsibility that you're going to have for 10 years, 15 years.
Some go as long as 25 years, right? 25 years, yeah.
But let me tell you, this guy moved into this house. He has a wife and kids, right? He moved into this house, and a year later, everything in that house was falling apart in terms of the finishes. So the tiles were popping. I don't know if you've ever seen tiles because of like the pressure or something, they're popping. And then the taps are rusting, the sinks are breaking, like almost everything they used was substandard. And this guy had to fight or take an additional loan of 2 million to replace almost 90% of everything that was in the house. So just in case you think that what she's saying is not serious, it is serious.
It has happened to people.
And honestly, like, who has, I can lose 2 million. And I think also that reminds me that there was a different video we gave. First of all, you've done so many videos with a boy about buying land, buying apartments, how to make the most of your investment decision when it comes to real estate, taxes, everything when it comes to buying purchases in real estate. So I've just remembered when I was giving that example, there was a time you say that in your sale agreement or in your contract, you should negotiate to have a clause that says if any of these things, the finishes, fall apart, if I can say that, within the past 6 months, it is the developer's court. You remember?
Yes. It's called a defects liability clause. And a defect liability clause, basically what it states that is that if there are any structural defects within the house or within the apartment for the first 6 months, so the 6 months start counting from the date of completion, assuming that handover is done immediately after completion. So for the first 6 months, if anything breaks down or if anything cracks without any interference from the person living inside the house, it's the responsibility of the vendor to repair or to fix that defect at their own cost. Because then the presumption is if within 6 months something has broken down and I haven't touched it, then chances are that it was poor workmanship or it was a poor quality that was procured. So the thing to pay attention to when you're looking at that clause is also to ensure, one, there are exemptions when it comes to that clause. They say if something breaks down in the course of you trying to fit out something, then that's exempted. Or if it's like normal wear and tear, again, that's exempted. But anything that literally breaks down without being touched, then that one you're supposed to have it repaired or fixed by the developer at their own cost. And sometimes it helps to also have a timeline for when that repair would be done. Because assuming you have a leakage in your house and the developer doesn't repair it, and you notify them, and then it's 2 weeks later, nobody has come to repair it. I mean, how are you supposed to live in that house? So the other thing is important to negotiate a timeline within which that repair or that thing will be fixed.
So based on the conversation we've been having, and clearly we said that a sale agreement is a risk management tool, is that these are the issues you're facing as a purchaser. Make sure this and this clause is included to mitigate all these things, to make sure that you're compensated, to make sure that you do not waste your money. But despite all that, we have seen people make huge losses when it comes to the real estate market in Kenya. And to avoid all those scandals, to avoid even wasting time, I'm sure there are developers we are not supposed to touch, maybe the tin fruit bowl. And this you can tell from the very beginning, where you see a red flag, right? Like an extremely red. So what are these things that if we see them in developers or we see them in sale agreements, we should not even think about working with that developer?
There are many I can think about.
Yes.
And every time a client has come to me having lost their money or being on the verge of losing their money in a scam project, I'll spot one of them in that transaction. Number one, and the most obvious ones, and let me mention right from the onset, we have different kinds of developers in the country. We have the Chinese developers who are concentrated in certain areas. We have developers who are doing the big mixed use project. The kind of, we have Tilisi in Limuru, we have Tatu City in Ruiru, Kiambu. We have Northlands coming up very steadily. We have, the kinds of Mevida. We also have some local developers who've been doing developments for a long time. And I would say this. And as much as you should judge each developer on their own merit, there's a certain crop of developers we've seen con people or scam people over and over again. And the script is very similar.
Yeah.
They come together, they come up with a name, they start their project, they start their marketing, they find some very posh offices. Many of them have a preference for Westlands. You find them with a very posh offices with very well dressed sales agents and representatives, and then they take the most popular influencers of the time and pour a lot of money to them, and they're here preaching the gospel of this developer both in the country and abroad. And it's so unfortunate that there's so many people, especially in the US, Kenyans in diaspora, that have lost money with these with these developers. And the script is just the same. You look at them, I'll not mention names, but you can already tell who I'm talking about. They come together, 2 or 3 people, they incorporate the company, they do the advertisement, they get the influencer, they do world tours, they'll probably do one project successfully and, scream, about it. And, people take their money there. And the one thing that I've noticed that runs across those developers, many of whom who are locals, is number one, they'll start a project and they'll advertise it and collect money from unsuspecting individuals when they don't own the land on which they are purporting to construct this. In those many projects that have mentioned that Kenyans in diaspora have been scammed, and even Kenyans within the country have been scammed.
That's the biggest issue.
The script is the same.
Yeah.
They buy land, they haven't finalized the process, they start doing marketing. And it's very unfortunate. In fact, there's one of my clients that I've been helping. She came to me again. She's one of the many hundreds of people who've suffered in those kind of scam projects. So in that case, this company bought this land. They never finalized the purchase. They never finalized the transfer. They put up the houses. And even before they could complete the finishes, the gentleman that they were supposedly buying land from passed on. There was a dispute with the family. The transfer could not be done. There was a case in court. They had run out of money. They never completed the houses. People had paid in full. Yeah. Like I'm talking about a practical one that I have seen.
Yeah.
So ultimately what ended up happening is that some of the purchasers that realized that this is going really wrong and I might as well take what is left of this project, they went and tried to make the houses, the rest of what had not been done by the developers, they tried to do it for themselves and move in at least so that for the duration that the case will depend in court,
Yeah.
if at all they would end up losing, then again maybe they would have saved they'll have saved the rent for the period of time that they'll have lived in that house.
Yeah.
Recently, I heard they got eviction letters from now the family of the man. Yes,
The land.
yes. And by this time, this company has closed down. Their offices are closed. The developers are always hopping from one Airbnb to another.
Yeah.
Because they're now a flight risk. And the stories are really, really sad. And when you follow the script, it's the same. Use the most popular influencers in town. Don't own the land, fall into cash flow issues, take so many projects at a time, and and when one thing fails, they close up that company. The same individuals go open another company, market it with a different brand, and do the same thing.
Yes.
Over and over again, and it's extremely sad. But anyway, I think that has already captured some of the red flags that I'm talking about. A developer that doesn't own the land on which they're purporting to construct on.
Yeah.
A developer that is asking for your money, yet them themselves haven't gotten the go-ahead from the government to go ahead with the construction. They haven't gotten any of the 4 approvals that they must get. They're also using bank financing without a very proper structure of how they intend to honor their obligations to the bank.
Yes.
Such that the purchasers do not get caught up in the default scenario. Then we have this issue of purchasers being rushed. We are presenting you with an offer today, and if you don't pay today, this project you're not going to find it tomorrow. Every person that comes to you with such a language, be very careful. Be very careful. Because they'll try to entice you with the discounts. They're going to entice you with the demand. They'll always make it look like the units they're selling to you, if you don't pay a reservation fee tomorrow you'll not find it. Trust me. I've represented clients who have told, actually, if that's the scenario, you walk away. Within a week, they find another project that is way better than the one they let go. So don't let anybody intimidate. In fact, the number of constructions going up in this country, why are you letting someone intimidate you? And it's your money. And then also I've seen people who refuse to give purchaser sale agreement. You ask for the sale agreement, they tell you, you pay the deposit first. But why are you paying a deposit when you don't have a contract? You don't even know what the contract will come saying. Why are you paying 2 million, 3 million? You don't know what the contract says. And being pushed so hard, pay, or else we're not entertaining you. I've told purchasers, be ready to walk away. Be ready to walk away. If you're not ready to lose your money, be ready to walk away. Yeah, so I think those are some of the ones that I will mention is the red flags or the things that sort of run across all those scam projects that we have seen.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about something else that you and I both experiences that about like anti-developer being extremely rigid about their sale agreement and offer letter.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing. As we mentioned earlier, the first sale agreement, first let's revisit. We say a good sale agreement is the cornerstone of any real estate, but we'll just say real estate transaction. Yeah. And the initial draft is developed by the developer's lawyers and from the standpoint of what are the risks that the developer is exposed to, right? Then the review is done by the purchaser's lawyer from the standpoint of what are the risks that my purchaser or my client is exposed to. And so an ideal transaction is where both these developers' lawyers and the purchaser's lawyers have a negotiation, a give and take, where you say, this is really, really important to my client. So let's retain this. And for this and this reason. And for you, you say, no, but this clause, it's really, really important for my client because of this and this. So you agree, okay, you have this clause, then we have this clause. So that at the end of the day, the document you come up with, it's fairly balanced. The developer is taking certain risks and the purchaser is taking certain risks. But if you negotiate a contract where the developer's lawyer says no to every single thing, first of all, the initial contract, because sometimes you come across very good developer's lawyer whose initial draft has already really tried to balance the interests of both parties and tried to distribute the risks among both parties. But if you're coming to me as a developer's lawyer, where your contract is already extremely biased against my client and very favorable for your client, I try to negotiate, say, 10 clauses, and you say absolutely no to all of them.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, where is the goodwill? Do you even care about this purchaser? Because if you want the purchaser to absorb all the risks and you to not absorb any of the risks, for me at that point, I'm usually ready to tell my client, you are allowed to walk away. There are many other developers who will agree to a sit down, will agree to a fair contract, will agree to distribution of risks.
Okay, so despite all these things, despite all the complexities that you've been talking about when it comes to offline purchases, why would, with Stripers or why would a Kenyan still want to commit to buying an apartment through the offline method?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I'm sure there's somebody who is asking themselves that because, of all those challenges, all those complexities, all those negotiations, why the hell should I even consider offline as a method of owning a property? And I'd say there are many reasons why you should still consider offline.
Yeah.
With all its challenges.
Yes.
Because number one, the affordability.
Yeah.
There's actually that is, that tops it all. Yeah, the affordability. Because if today you walk along, say, Lavington, and you find a project coming up, and you try to buy an apartment now, you might be lucky to maybe get a decent one bedroom at maybe 6.5 million, right?
Yeah.
If 2 years later you come back to the same street, the same building, having been complete, you'll be lucky to really get it at 80 million. Yes, right? Yeah. Because those are the maths of off plan. With off plan, the developer is distributing the beast by making you all contribute to the construction of these projects. But at the end of the day, we all walk away with something, right? So the affordability aspect, it's really, really key. In fact, offline is the only reason why a good number of Kenyans own, or even, foreign clients have been able to own properties because, you commit to a project, you pay up 20 to 30% down payment, which is easier for many people to raise. Then you pay the other installments across the whole construction period. And many times it's between 2 and 4 years. The ones that are completed could be about 2 years. The ones that are a bit complex, they could take up to 4 years. So then your payments are distributed across the whole period. And there are some developers who will also allow you to continue making payments even after completion. So it gives you a high level of flexibility that if you're buying a complete development, you may not get, because the alternative of being able to afford this, not through off-plan, is mortgage. Yeah. But then mortgage comes with many other mads. Yes. So first, we still have to base the deposit or the estimate. Yeah. True, the cost of credit in this country is crazy. Yes. I don't know if it's in this country, but my experience with this country, the cost of credit can be crazy. Yeah. Because first of all, if you talk about the securitization process, now is the process where the bank does due diligence and registers its security. So the whole thing, first from assessing your credit worthiness, yes, to doing the due diligence, to doing valuation, to getting their lawyers to register the security, to insuring, yeah. So there's so many costs that already you will pay on top of the purchase price before even we start calculating the interest payments through, right? Yeah. So when you think about it, so for the people who don't want that long-term liability with the banks and are able to able to raise their money within now that period of maybe 3 years, then off-plan is a much, much attractive or even attractive option for their affordability aspect. Yeah. Now, something else, when it comes to these developments that are coming up, everybody wants the units on the top floors. Yeah. Because the units on the top floors, number one, chances of them getting natural light are very high. Yeah. Because then there are no adjacent tall buildings for most of them. Yeah. There are no adjacent tall buildings just next to the building. So the possibility of getting a very well lit unit and a unit that has really beautiful views is high for the high units. Now what is happening is right now developers are doing groundbreaking and starting to sell. Of course, the first batch of purchasers will pick all the higher floors. So if for you don't want to take the risk and you wait until completion, you'll end up getting a unit maybe on the ground floor, first floor, second floor, which now comes with all these other challenges of lighting, the views, yeah. So that's the other thing that people who commit to projects when they're still off plan end up getting, we can say, much high value units. Then there's a customization aspect. So when you're buying an off-plan project, usually you're able to predict your needs and have the developer, not in all cases, but I've seen cases where developers are willing to customize certain aspects of the construction at the request of the purchaser. So for example, there's a purchaser that I've represented about 2 years ago. He was buying an apartment down at the coast, and he knew that his mother-in-law was going to live with them at some point, and she was handicapped. She was moving around with a wheelchair. So there are some aspects of the building where they would have staircases. It was possible for this purchaser to negotiate with the developer to ensure that for every provision of staircases, they would instead provide a ramp. So already they customized the unit to what fit their specific circumstances. Because now the other alternative of finding a complete unit, chances are the developer may not think of some of these peculiar needs or rather special needs yet. Yeah. And then also maybe something else why people should still, even as much as afraid as they are, people should still consider off-plan as a plan is because off-plan has been performing very well in the last couple of years. I can say that from the standpoint of a person who's been representing people in this transaction. There's been a way higher rate of timely delivery, well-constructed houses or units.
So there's progress.
There's a lot of progress. There are developers that have gotten very good reputation from what they've been able to do in the past, say 5 years or 10 years.
Danny, like telling us a good of buying of land.
Yeah, I think we've covered we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I think my most important thing is hearing you say that there's progress. So there is. We have so much fear when it comes to these things. The market of Bible plan apartments, like you approach it with fear. So there is and you're someone with these transactions on a daily basis. It's like in this progress, they're happy that there's progress. So people are doing what they are meant to do.
Yeah.
So that's good. So above all that, what to end this video, Agi is supposed to remember. At the end of the day, what I'm here has to remember, also most about that they are supposed to do.
So my parting shots, I think those also sound like repetition. That due diligence is not something you compromise on. And more so for off-plan.
Yeah.
It's not something you compromise or cheapskate on. Yeah. Number 2, sale agreement. A letter sale agreement is the cornerstone for any proper real estate transaction. Because when things go south, you're vowed. The sale agreement is your fallback plan.
Yeah.
As you have a bad sale agreement, that's it for you. Yeah, right? And number 3, this is it. And actually, this will be my cutting short. The cost or the price for not following or not doing this thing to the right people, that you deal with and the sale agreement and everything is literally, the cost of it is litigation, where things go wrong and now you end up in court. Litigation is so expensive in so many ways that any conveyancing advocate worth their salt will tell you, when I'm doing a transaction, my number 1A is for my client not to end up in court, right? Because then you're shielding them from the emotional, financial, heavy burden of litigation. I'll tell you what litigation looks like.
Yeah.
If you go to court today because a developer has refused to, honor one thing or the other, and now you're demanding, you're trying to get the court to interpret whether you're entitled to a refund or not. Number 1, if your case, obviously, if you're talking about this kind of properties, it's for more than 1 million. So you're not going to the small claims court, you're going to the magistrate court. Magistrate courts, cases on average lamp on for, if it's finalized within 3 years, if you get a judgment within 3 years, you are a very lucky person. Cases go up to 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. And getting a judgment is not the end of it. If anything, litigation lawyers will tell you getting a judgment is like the beginning. Because getting a judgment is the court agreeing with you that yes, you are entitled to the money. But the judge will never leave their chamber to go looking for the developer who owes you money to tell them lipa who you want to. It's for you to now start the execution process. The execution process is where you start finding out this company that scammed me, what does it owe? Chances are, if they were scammers, they never owned anything in that company.
So they may not even have a capacity to pay you.
Yes. And sometimes you can't even reach the individuals behind the company because you remember that thing we discussed of separate legal personality?
Yes.
The company is separate from the individual. Yes. So my company can owe you,
But I do not owe you.
but if the company doesn't have any assets, you can know that I have certain assets and have certain amounts of money. I thought you cannot come after my personal money unless you two go through a very long and rigorous process, which you may or may not be successful. So the cost mitigation is really high in so many ways, and the only way to avoid it is to do the transaction very well from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that would be my batting shot.
Yeah, that's a heavy one.
Yeah.
Woo.
If you think the cost of...
I felt a bit cold.
Yeah.
The cost of
I mean,
like 3 years.
there are people in court today getting mention dates for next year. Yes, you've come to court, you're supposed to proceed with a certain thing. The other lawyer is not ready, and you ask for a date, and the judge clearly tells you 22nd of February 2025. I've seen it happen. People are getting court dates in next year because the court's diary is full. The court's diary is full. Everybody's trying to get a date.
Yeah.
Right? So litigation is really, really expensive. So if you think a conveyancing advocate is expensive, try doing litigation.
Oh my God, I like that. I feel like your ending also reminds us what we've always said in all our videos: doesn't end wrong. It's that. And so that means that you need a conveyancing lawyer. You need to have the right people in your transaction. You need to engage the right people in your transaction and get up, but you to which you get up. So in that case, you do need Wamuyu service in a conveyancing lawyer. Where can you find you? How can we contact you?
There are many ways of contacting me. Number one is through my email address. You can either find me at info@wanjikokanyiri.com or wamoyo@wanjikokanyiri.com.
Yeah.
You can also find me on my number, which is 0715 934413. 0715 934413. And it's available both on normal phone and on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
We also have our offices in town at View Park Towers, 8th floor. So I'm welcome to you're welcome to come discuss whatever concerns you have about the transactions that you are undertaking, and I'll guide you.
Yeah. Because I do know for sure that there are many tribers who are interested buying property. And I'm now saying property because, as I say, Wamuyu is experienced in land, apartments, taxes when it comes to all these things, trust.
Yeah.
Our office deals a lot, especially in estate planning matters, helping you draft a will. So anything that's involved with you buying property and you passing down property to your beneficiaries, they can help with that. And so with that, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Yeah.
I know, like, we've been doing this for so long. So the other thing is that if you're new to the Wealth Tribe, this is our familiar. And so with that, it's always a pleasure to have these conversations, to educate Wealth Tribers, to help you build wealth, because at the end of the day, the Wealth Tribe role is building wealth together. It is for me, for her, and for every of us to share the wisdom that makes sure that we defeat poverty, because poverty is always the enemy. And so with that, my name is Agatha from the Wealth Tribe, and this is where we learn how to build wealth. You know it together.